Tonight, I want to show you a game between Efim and Paul Keres from 1953, and it is a strange one. 5 times in this game a piece is offered up, and not one of those offers is a wild attacking flourish. They are all small, cold decisions. It comes from the candidates tournament, the strongest event of its year, and it turns on a single pinned knight. Let's watch it happen. We begin with d4, Geller taking his share of the center, and Keres replies knight to f6. The pawn steps to c4, and black answers e6. Knight to c3 comes out next, and d5 stakes the claim in the middle. Knight to f3 develops quietly, then c5 strikes at the center again. Tension breaks with pawn takes d5, and pawn takes d4 rips the position open. So the queen recaptures on d4, planted right in the middle of the board, and pawn takes d5 leaves black with an isolated pawn to nurse. Geller goes straight at it with e4, and knight to c6 develops while nudging that centralized queen. Does the queen step aside? Not yet. Instead, the bishop swings out to b5, and now the knight on c6 is pinned against the king on e8. Keep an eye on that knight. It is the whole story. So with one piece already frozen, does Keres play it safe? He does not. Knight takes e4, grabs the center pawn, and offers the horse back because the knight on c6, pinned as it is, still glares at the white queen. Geller castles, tucking the king away with the pin still intact. The knight comes home to f6, and rook to e1 slams down on the open file with check. Black has a handful of ways to deal with it, and picks the natural one. Bishop to e7 blocks the file, but look what that costs. The bishop is pinned too now, 2 black pieces nailed in place, and the game's still level. Now Geller pushes his luck. Queen to e5 keeps the bishop pinned and attacks the f6 knight as well, a fork of sorts. The trouble is the queen sits on a square that pinned knight on c6 is watching, and from here black is the one who is a shade more comfortable, so why not cash the pin in first? Let me show you what was available. Bishop takes c6 with check, collects the frozen knight while it is still frozen, before black ever gets the chance to untangle. Black recaptures with pawn takes c6, the queenside pawns are damaged and white stands perfectly healthy. But Geller trusted his queen instead, and the pin was never converted. Keres castles, calmly stepping off that dangerous file. The queen drops back to e2, still eyeing the bishop on e7. A rook joins on e8. Bishop to g5 leans on the knight, and bishop to g4 stares straight back at the knight on f3. Then rook to d1 lines up on the isolated pawn. Keres asks the question with h6, and the bishop keeps the tension with bishop to h4. And here is Keres offering again. Knight to e4 leaps into the middle, loose, unafraid, hitting the knight on c3, and the isolated pawn behind it is loose too. He is playing for pieces, not for pawns, and he is clearly better. Geller slides the bishop to g3 out of the pawn's way, but that hands the knight a fork. From e4 it hits the knight on c3 and the bishop on g3 at the same time. Off it comes. Knight takes c3 forks bishop, rook, and queen all at once, so pawn takes c3 as the recapture, and bishop to f6 rakes down the diagonal at that lonely c3 pawn. Can Geller escape into a trade? Queen takes e8, comes with check, forking the black queen and the knight on c6, and for a second it looks like white is untangling by force. The queen recaptures on e8, and rook takes e8 as check again, hitting the king and the rook behind it on a8. Everything is coming off, and that is exactly what Keres wants, because the resulting endgame belongs to him. Rook takes e8 answers. Geller pockets the weak pawn with rook takes d5, and the black rook swings to c8, aiming at c3. Rook to d3 defends the pawn, and it is understandable, but this is the wrong square, and from here black's advantage becomes decisive. So what was wrong with guarding it from the third rank? Rook to d6 was the better home? The pawn is still covered, the rook stays active on the 6th, and crucially it sits where no black knight can come and harass it. White is worse, but fighting. On d3 though, it is a target, and Keres pounced. Knight to b4 is the punishment. Our once pinned knight finally gets to move, and it attacks the a2 pawn while adding a second attacker to c3. That piece has waited 20 moves for this. Rook to e3 keeps the c-pawn guarded, so the knight simply helps itself with knight takes a2. The pawn push h3 asks the bishop a question, and bishop takes f3 answers by removing the knight. Pawn takes f3 recaptures and shatters white's kingside, while the bishop on f6 looks all the way down to c3. Knight takes c3 collects the pawn and hits the bishop on b5 as it lands. That bishop runs to d7 and attacks the rook, so rook to d8 attacks it right back. Bishop to f5 retreats, and g6 shoos it away once more. Now, where should that bishop stand? Bishop to d3 keeps the diagonal towards g6, but it parks the piece directly in front of the black rook, and the ground gives way again. Bishop to c2 was the square. Watch the difference. The bishop still holds the same diagonal, but it steps out of the rook's line, so white is not spending every move rescuing a bishop, and there is at least a defense to build. That is not what happened, and the last black piece came in. Knight to d1 drops in behind the lines and attacks the rook on e3. Geller resigned. He stopped because there is nothing left to hold. He is a full knight down. His kingside pawns are broken after taking on f3. His bishop is being chased from square to square, and now a knight has landed on his back rank, hitting the rook. And it is the same knight, that one on c6 that Geller pinned on move 9 and never took. It sat there unable to move for half the game. Then it ate a 2, 8c3 and finished the job. Thanks for watching Nocturne Chess. If you enjoyed this game, subscribe for more quiet journeys through chess history. Until the next board. Good night.